Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Dr. Heather Brown. She's a doctor of psychology, a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's been on TedX and she's a keynote speaker. She is a relationship expert and helps people recognize the power of communication. Dr. Heather has a unique and powerful awareness that no one has the same reality, although we believe we do. So this perspective is really amazing, and I'm excited to dig deep into this. So, utilizing this revolutionary awareness has allowed her to transform communication within self and within all other types of relationships. So, we're going to be diving deep into the importance and sacredness of communication between partners on their fertility journey, which could look like fear, honesty, shame, guilt, blame, all of the things. And right, when we're trying to conceive, two are basically becoming one. So it's very crucial to have open and honest communication. So welcome, Dr. Heather. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. And I'd love to jump right in and learn how you came to be passionate and an expert in your field.
Oh, I'm honored to be here and in such a sacred space of infertility and such an uncomfortable and awkward place for a lot of us that a lot of people shy away from talking about it. And it's really important that we don't. So for all the listeners, my hand and my hearts are out to you. And I hope this time blesses you. So in a nutshell, my mom was a paranoid schizophrenic. And so living with someone who at times is in a completely different reality let me know that we don't look and see and think and feel about things the same way. And then when you take that in a broader sense, none of us do. The woman who's having a challenge conceiving and the man who's having a challenge conceiving have different lives, different experiences, different beliefs, different feelings. And so it's important that we realize that, especially in infertility, because for both people, it's part of their journey. And then, of course, a huge part together. And there's a lot of emotions that come packed to that one. Guilt and shame and anger and frustration and resentment. And it's hard to not point the finger if one person's body is not as agreeable as the other. And there's a lot to explore in that to try to find a way to love each other through that differently than what we believe will happen. I think most of us think, you fall in love and you have kids. For a lot of people, it's not that simple. It's not that easy, or it might not even be possible. And that's something for us to embrace and explore together.
Absolutely. And I love this perspective and idea of truly, we really do all perceive the world in our own unique way. But I feel like it's so easy to lose sight of that or almost forget that piece, right? You and I can look at a tree and think so many different things about that tree. And it is true that the woman and the man can have such a different experience when it comes to fertility struggles. And I think a lot of times men almost find it hard to express how they're feeling as well.
I think often men have a hard time expressing because we've told men to not have feelings, to not feel their feelings, to not be weak, to not be soft. I think that's changing dramatically now. But I think there's a role in the man often to protect
Mm.
and to fix and to solve. And that's not possible sometimes in infertility. And then there's also the place, and this is something to be aware of. The woman hormonally is going through a lot, especially if you're doing IVF and things like that, that are inflating the hormones and trying to get things going. And the man often has the viewpoint, my poor wife is going through enough, or she's really overly emotional. I just have to close myself off and just be there for her. And at times, that really might be the case, because for a lot of women going through that process is incredibly hard and challenging and confusing, because the emotions are just all over the place and you're feeling a little bit sometimes crazy in the way your body is responding. And then in pregnancy sometimes too. I remember I'd go between laughing and crying on a topic of thinking something was funny and then thinking it wasn't funny. And I remember my husband saying, gosh, if you weren't pregnant, I would think you were nuts. And I'm like, I would too, because I was literally going between crying and laughing quickly. So for a man, that's incredibly confusing and hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's the place to talk about that from the woman's perspective. I do want to know what you're feeling. I do want to know what you're thinking. And if I'm not in a place to be able to receive it, could you please be talking to others about this? There's also support groups that can be very helpful, because then there's people on both sides saying, I got you, dude. I got you, sweetheart, trying to help each other through the process. That can be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the truth of our thoughts and feelings change. There's moments in the infertility journey where you're hopeful. There's moments where you're angry. There's moments where you're sad. There might be moments where you're helpless. There might be moments where you stop. And so we're not even the same in different places of our journey. So it's important to realize that there isn't a constancy. That's the truth of emotions. That's the truth of thought. They shift, they change, and then they become something other than what they have ever been.
Yeah. So if you had, I don't know if you see couples or just people individually, but if you had a couple coming to you with these struggles, what would be either your number one recommendation or like your top three ways to support them in this ever-changing, evolving phase of life that they're in?
First, education. I think it's really important to try to give them resources and contacts
Mm.
and places where they can be around other people who are going through that journey, or having places to process it beyond just the therapeutic hour. I also encourage them to open up a container of time in each day to talk about it and to process it and to come together. Women tend to share their feelings as they feel them. And for men, they're much better at compartmentalizing than we are. And so it's hard oftentimes for a man, if it's throughout the day, if you create a space of time where this is where we're really going to come together, that the man has a little bit of a better understanding of what is wanted and to come through, but then also doesn't feel like I just have to be here waiting for you in case you're about to cry, because it can feel very overwhelming for the man. And so I encourage, make certain you've got a period of time each day where you're coming together to really love on each other and care for each other and ask, how can I be there for you right now? How can I support you right now? Because there's other times that life does have to go on, and it's important to try to find that balance. And then certainly each person individually needs to find out, what do they need to do to take care of themselves. There's a different way of self-care for one person to another. And so it's important to really honor that for yourself. When I'm a widow, my husband and I grieved differently. And it was, I thought, unfortunate, but it was just the reality of who we were. And when I grieve, I want to be held and I want to be comforted. My husband wants to break and shoot things. Those two don't go together well. And so I would have to say to him, go do all the dude stuff. I'll call my girlfriend and she'll come hold me. And then 2, 3 days later, when his anger was less, when my sadness was less, we could come together and share a little bit of where we had been. But in the pit of it, we weren't good for each other. And it made me a little sad, but it was just our truth. So instead of telling him, no, you have to stay here and hold me when he's angry, or for me to go to the shooting range with him and sit there and cry that he's killing a clay pigeon, one more thing is dead now. It just wasn't good. So honor yourself and what you need to care for yourself and
Mhm.
really make certain you come through for yourself as much as possible.
Yeah, I love going back to what you were initially speaking to, the idea of like almost a date, like scheduling in that time, whether it's for 5 minutes or whatever you have the capacity for, because of course we're all so busy, but I love that time and just penciling it in because I even remember we struggled to get pregnant for a while and driving to work and feelings coming up and you feel like you don't have time to process them when you have to go open a pharmacy, which was what I was doing. So having that space, I think, is almost like a sigh of relief for your nervous system. Okay, get through the day, but when you are in this like safe space, safe container, whatever it is that you create with your partner, and you guys can just be and talk to each other. Because I think a lot of times what I see with my clients is they don't talk with each other. They're not communicating. They're holding it in, whether it's they don't want to burden the other or they feel like they have to be strong for themselves or their other person, or maybe they weren't raised to really sit with their emotions too. So I think
That
working,
happens a lot with the anger.
yeah.
I see the sadness tends to be able to creep out a little bit better for both of us. But when we're angry and it's displaced, it's often I'm angry at God or I'm angry at your body. And I think it's important for us to recognize that we assume we'll be able to get pregnant. And I don't really know why we do. I think it looks to the world like it's easy for people to get pregnant. People don't even want to get pregnant and they get pregnant. People get pregnant and then they try to get rid of being pregnant. I think we have the belief of, oh, it'll be easy for me as well, but not necessarily. And there's also a place for the woman where the woman can feel like she's not really a woman because she's not able to get pregnant. And that's not true at all. Your body is the way your body is for whatever reason. And then it's learning to work with that in the ways that you can in the very best way to try to decide what you do with that. But there's a lot of anger that comes up in this process a lot of times. And people don't want to say, but people always want to know whose fault is it? And you'll hear that. Oh, so he can't. Oh, she can't. That's so hard. That's so hard. And it's something that needs to be explored with a whole lot of love to be able to realize nobody who wants to be pregnant wants to stop the process. No one wants a low sperm count. No one wants eggs that aren't viable. And there's the place of remembering that. And we can really get into shame and blame there, which is very destructive to ourself or against our partner.
Absolutely.
I
And
know they have to find out why because they have to try to overcome it. I think it'd be really helpful to have a little time in that of, okay, so what do we do with this so you handle this information as best as possible?
yeah,
Yeah.
wanting an answer to I've heard some people mention just to give them some sense of closure. Like I know women, when they experience a miscarriage, they want to know why. Did it have to do with genetics? Was it my progesterone? Was it this? Was it that? So some sort of form of closure or just knowing. But yeah, when it becomes the blaming or pointing a finger, it's you, oh, it's me, I think that can bring up so many things. And going back to what you were saying about when people grieve differently. So I'm thinking maybe you've been on a fertility journey for years and you've had multiple failed IUIs or IVF. That's something to grieve. Maybe you've had a miscarriage or multiple miscarriages, or I've even had some women on who have had stillbirths and just all of these things. So the word that comes up in my mind, which is what you were speaking to on your TEDx talk, was compassion, because I think it's so easy to get upset with your partner when maybe you are the one that wants to feel held, when you're grieving. And then maybe your partner isn't, so you can get mad at them because they're not giving you what you want, but then it's also like they need their space
Right.
and time to move
Right.
through it as well.
And that's a conversation to have.
Yep.
Do I have the ability to be there for you? And if I don't, I am so sorry, but I need to make certain that you can get that somewhere that's safe for you. And if I do have the space to be there for you, how are you asking me to be there with you to help you in what's going on?
Hmm.
You can be with someone who's angry at the situation. You can even be there with someone who's angry at your body. It's tough. It's tough to sit there with somebody who's angry that your body is not giving them what it is that they wish. But it's important to walk through that to be able to say, I feel that too. And I feel that probably maybe even more so because I know you want this. And I feel like my body is keeping us from having that. If you can come into that conversation and really love each other through that, it is a glorious place. But most people don't ever even have that conversation. And
Hmm.
I think it's so unfortunate. A woman oftentimes will feel like I've literally heard women say, I wish he hadn't married me because I can't give him what he wants. And I'm like, okay, we got to unpack this because yes, there's a component of desire there. But if you ask the man, do you wish you hadn't married your wife, or do you wish to not be with your partner because she can't give you that child? I am yet to hear a man say, absolutely, I am done, I am out. But yet we believe that. And then we really hold that. And I think even those thoughts, those feelings, those beliefs against our body probably do a whole lot more destruction in our fertility journey because now we're telling our body it's a failure. We hate it. It's not able to love our husband in the way that we want. There's a lot of importance in loving who we are as we are. I have people who struggle with gender who have reached out to me. And one thing I always say is before you have the surgery, I really hope you take some time to love the body that you came into this world with. And there's a struggle there. And it's not a specialty that I have, but I say, if you're hating the body that you have going into that surgery, it's not going to energetically be the same. I'm not saying don't change your body, but there's a place of embracing the body as it is through the change for it to be something other. Whether that's infertility, whether that's gender, whether that's weight, it's so important that we recognize that. When I hate a part of me, oh, I'm really in trouble. I'm really in trouble because that part really needs to be loved for me to then be able to help it shift. When I hate it, it's stuck. I give it too much power and I lose mine. When I say, okay, you are as you are, I'm going to see if I can make some changes from how you are because I'd like you to be like this. There's more movement. And we don't realize that. We do so much damage hating ourselves and then wondering why we're addicted, depressed, sad, overweight, tired, exhausted. It's because we're putting so much energy into our system that's negative, that's harsh, that's punishing. Our poor little body is just here trying to bless us. My thighs never asked for a chocolate chip cookie. And then I hate them, poor little things, poor little chubby little things. That's me. We got to take ownership. And there is a place that I really wish when we were young that we were taught you believe things will be a certain way, but it doesn't mean that they will. And we really have to work with what is and what is until you find a way to have it be beyond. But it's important to embrace what is to be able to move beyond instead of our viewpoint is just change it, just change it. And that doesn't embrace the energetic of what is first, which I think is really important. I think that's the reason I got the insight I did with my mom. I had to embrace her reality. That was hers. It wasn't mine. There was a moment when I was 12, there were helicopters flying over the house, and she was fearful they were coming to get her. And my dad, this is my TEDx, my dad did what most people would do. You're crazy. It's all in your head. They're not coming to get you. And I saw her shaking and I thought, this isn't working. What does she need? And she needed to feel safe. So I grabbed my little blue blanket, Bambi, and threw it over her head. And I said, they're not going to get you, Mommy. They're not going to get you. And when she came out, she looked at me with eyes that said, you believe me. And I didn't. Her reality wasn't my reality, but I didn't denounce hers. I recognized it was hers. And that's what allowed the shift. Now, she could be in her reality, I could be in mine, and me wanting to comfort her, me wanting to provide safety for her was the bridge. When we realize that within our own body as well, and with others, that compassion is that place. How do I love my body even though it's not doing what it is that I wish it would do? How do I love it more? Because my body's probably grieving too. How do I embrace what is to try to see if there's a way for it to move beyond this? And if there's not, then what do I do with this is who my body is? A lot of choices there. But anger is not the answer. Hatred, resentment is not the answer. And that just causes more challenges within us cellularly and psychologically.
Yeah, I think the self-love and the self-worth component is really heavy for a lot of women who I feel like the majority of the time they're perceiving it as quote unquote their fault because sometimes we're not so quick to do a semen analysis and things like that. So I think a lot of times women take that burden and really do hold that resentment and that shame. And like you had mentioned earlier, giving your power away to those pieces. And I do find that when you are able to come back into that like wholeness, we are all inherently whole, but either through society or maybe what we experience growing up with our parents or in school, that has been stripped away from us, where we feel that there are things wrong with us, whether it's maybe your thighs aren't the way you want them to be, or your hair, or your face, or just so many things. And then, of course, when you're having trouble conceiving, your body in of itself. So I love what you're saying is really finding that self-love and compassion too, and how that's the bridge to really being able to communicate.
I had a client who had polio at 2, quadriplegic.
Mm.
She was amazing. And she never was angry with her body. She remembered what it felt like to walk. She remembered what it felt like to run. And she was grateful for that memory. But she said she was actually never angry with her body for what had happened. She believed that was to be her journey. And she believed that journey was one where she could help a lot of people. I know she helped me just in that space. And the things that she had to go through were insane because when there were power outages, she was stuck in
Mm.
bed, not able to move because her wheelchair wouldn't work. She couldn't eat. She couldn't get to the bathroom. It was wild what her life was. And we don't think of those things. We just don't. And I was so in awe of her that she wasn't angry, that she didn't have the possibilities that others had. And she said, it gives me the most amazing gratefulness and joy and appreciation that people will never feel. I
Wow.
know I was incredibly grateful for her.
Yeah, just being grateful to be alive, right?
Yeah, because by all reasons, you think she wouldn't have been.
Hmm.
And she made it through so much. It was amazing. She got her master's and she did incredible things in the world. Incredible things.
Hmm.
So there's that place of, gosh, I am here. And even just that, what is that? I am here. I want a child here. Am I being gifted that at this time or not? And what am I to do with that? What choices do we have with that? If we're not able to conceive on our own, what choices do we make? Do we move into the place of foster? Do we move into the place of surrogate? Do we move into the place of adoption? Do we do IVF? What are the choices that we're going to do? And how can I look at that as being miraculous as well? You couldn't do that 100 years ago. You couldn't be pregnant. You weren't pregnant. That's it.
Mhm.
And now it's amazing what possibilities we have. And there's still that human truth of we don't have complete control. I had a client who had 4 children. One survived. She got pregnant a lot. Wild journey. 4 children and one survived. And not all from stillbirth. Like one lived 9 months, one lived 2 months. So there's a place of also recognizing maybe there's a reason that it's not happening. I had a miscarriage. It was really early on. They called it a sac. And when I passed it, I saw there wasn't a delineation of arms and legs or very little of the head. So it didn't look like a baby. It looked like my pinky with no skin on it. But to me, it still was. But there was a place of me looking at that and recognizing, no, this wasn't going to become a human being in the way that I would assume if it had continued. But that's a hard place.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's so important to be incredibly gentle with yourself in this process because it really plays with your mind. It plays with your heart. It plays with your body. And in this world, it is pretty easy for a lot of people to get pregnant. And that's tough when around you, what you're seeing is baby showers and lots of children. And there's also the sad truth. Maybe it's not a sad truth. I'll take that away. There is the truth that when we want something, we start to see it everywhere.
Mhm.
And when there's a struggle to try to have something be your reality and it's not coming through, that's a very hard place to be in.
Mhm.
Just because it's not for us to have doesn't mean we're wronged or unloved. But that's hard. That's hard. My mom killed herself. And so not having a mom, like I had to live life dealing with that. My husband died 10 years ago, really young for most people. I've had to try to deal with that and not view that as like, why me and why am I wronged and why do I have to raise children on my own and why did I have to raise myself on my own? That why, when we believe our life is going to be other than what it is. I think that is something we're not raised to do well, is to see life really as it is and to have it unfold before you. We all have dreams and hopes, and then life doesn't line up with it, and then we feel wronged, we feel cheated. I was never promised my mom would be here forever. I was never promised that I would have 2 children that lived beyond birth. I was never promised that. But we believe that these things will be ours, and we set ourselves up sometimes.
Yeah, almost having, I think, putting expectations on
Mhm.
ourselves. I remember when we started trying, it was in November, and I fully thought we'd be pregnant by December, and that didn't happen. But it's like, why did I put that expectation on myself? And I think one really powerful perspective shift is life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And it's so hard in the moment. But I think once you can see it in that way, it can be so powerful. I know that there was one couple who did all the things to get pregnant. It didn't happen, but then they fostered a child, I think from another country or something like that. And they just knew that is what they were supposed to do. That is the child that they were supposed to have and to care for. So I think just being open. to that.
And I have a dear friend who's a teacher, and they went through the whole process, and it did not happen. And I sat with her so many times talking through options, and she did not feel called to foster, and
Mhm.
she did not want to adopt. She's a teacher. And so we had a lot of talks about how she is a mother and she is
Mhm.
mothering and she knows it different than she had thought.
Yep.
But I think that's a really important place. Sometimes when our body or life situation seems to rob us of what our dream is, there is a place I feel that we can go to, which is to see how can that dream still be in some form, but not necessarily in the specificness.
Hmm.
I wanted to be an actress. At 6'1", there were very few opportunities for me. And so I had to decide, do I keep trying and trying and trying, or do I use that theatrical component in a different way in the world? I do. I use it a lot, but I'm very rarely actually acting. And I'm certainly not paid to be an actress, but I use that frequently. If you look at my TikToks and things like that, a lot of it is putting on the hat and acting different characters and things like that. So there's the place of, if you're not seeing it at the moment in a physical form, if you can find a way to have it be part of your energetic, that does open up the universe more so. How many people do you hear that as soon as they're adopting a child, they become pregnant? Why is it? They are receiving that they're going to be parents. And they've lessened the need for it to be biological, which I think sometimes unlocks for the body for it to be biological. When we're forcing, when we're pushing, when we're demanding, we're stepping into it is not. It is not. It has to happen. It didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? It was supposed to happen. We're telling all these things to our body, and our body's okay. It didn't happen. I wronged you. I failed you. And your body's taking all these messages. Whereas when we can open up our view a little bit larger and it puts us into the place of receiving, it can come in so many different ways.
Hmm.
If we realize that life is really about creation, it is a process continually of creation. It is about receiving and it is about offering. That is part of that journey on a really beautiful level. And sometimes we're not receiving in the way that we want to necessarily, but it doesn't mean you're not receiving. You might be receiving a lot of love. You might be receiving a lot of compassion. You might be receiving a lot of time. You might be receiving a child in a different way than you thought you would have had. So there's the place of asking yourself, if I'm not seeing it now in the form that I am believing it is to come in, how do I open myself up to a bigger energetic to see if that, at least I'll be in that realm. And then if it does come to a specific, hallelujah. If it doesn't, then I am getting the periphery of it, which still feels really good.
Mm. 100%. What I'm getting from that is becoming unattached from the how and the when.
If we can, and it's
If we
so
can. Yeah, it's
hard.
easier said than done. It is.
Yeah, but yes, yes,
Yeah. It's a
yes,
work in progress, right? That's what I always like to remind my clients and my community is it's not these shifts, these mindset shifts or whatever it is, it's not going to happen overnight. It's a
right.
continual thing that you have to decide to do or to show up for every day.
And it's opening yourself up for how does it show up?
Mm-hmm.
I just recently wrote a book, Speaking with the Heart for couples communication. And so I've sent it out to all my heroes. And some I just sent it out to, not even knowing if they're going to get it. Oprah and Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra and Dalai Lama, these people who I would love to open up my book, Drew Barrymore and Brene Brown. And some of them have come back non-deliverable. Some, then I reach out and say, could I send it to you? And there's some people in specific that I've really dreamed and felt and wanted to open. Here's a perfect example. One of the very first books I ever read on the self journey of healing was Love by Leo Buscaglia. long past. A lot of people don't even know him anymore because he's from 40 years ago. I wrote to them and I said, 44 years ago, I read his book and I fell in love with it and with his process. And it's taken me 44 years to write mine, but he would have loved it. And if it's something that you would like to read, I'd love to send you a copy. Got an email back today that said we would be honored to receive your book. And there's some people on the board who knew him.
Hmm.
Wasn't the person first that I thought of. He's not even here. He's not even going to open it. Hopefully, the board's going to open it, but it's not quite the way I visualized it. But yet, when I open myself beyond, oh,
Mhm.
I'm delighted. Okay, so Brene Brown's got returned to me. Leo Buscaglia, who's not even here on this earth, his people are going to read it. So sometimes it looks a little different than you think, but it still is in that area of creation. And whether this is a thought, this is just a thought, it just came to me. We can decide that we are a mother simply because we are mothering ourselves.
Hmm.
We can decide we are a father simply because we are fathering ourselves. And if we were to give ourselves that truth and to honor our body in that place and to really feel into that energetic, then however our body responds, however the universe responds, I have a feeling you would see it more and more. People say to me so much of the time, Mama Brown. And now I'm in the place where people are saying that I remind them of their grandmother. And I have to say, isn't that lovely? That's beautiful. And I have to say, I need to honor that because that's someone who's important to them. And that's an energy that I like to be in, that Mother Mary, beautiful energy. And so it happens in ways that are not my children. But I have a couple of people who've come into my life and they feel like they're my children because I adore them. And my kids know, they're like, how many kids do you have now, Mom? Like, a couple more. But there's the place of letting yourself find the energy of to become that which you want as the specific moments pop up. There's also the place of you don't know what's to come. And maybe there is that child who needs you, who's coming. Or maybe your body was just not in the place yet because that spirit, that soul wasn't ready to come through quite yet. Maybe part of that struggle is going to be part of the blessing. It is the truth that when we struggle more, we appreciate more. And so maybe that child is to be embraced and loved so, so dearly, whether it is biological or not. The energy of that, my Lord, you're going to do such beauty in this world. Such beauty in this world when it doesn't need to be mine, but it is to be all of us. I am a mother to all of you, and you are all my mothers if I allow that to be my truth.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly and on all the things that you just shared. That's a lovely way to end. So if you are listening to this episode, rewind and definitely listen again to the last 7 or 10 minutes because it is so true. And I think once you can be open to that, even if it's just like a 1% shift in that openness, it's going to have a snowball effect. It's gonna then become a maybe 2% more open and then 3, and it's just going to exponentially really open you up. Like for me, the place that I'm in right now, I was not in this place 5 years ago. It's a gradual process. And I think whether it's to bring a child into this world or just for general life, these are little nuggets of wisdom that you can take with you through so many different trials in life. So I love that. I do want to hear more about your book, Speaking with the Heart. And just hearing from the author, do you feel that this book is something that a couple struggling to conceive could benefit from reading?
Absolutely, because it's about communication. It's about learning how to care for each other. It's about learning how to come into a sacred space together. There is not a chapter on infidelity in the book, though. So if you're looking for a book that is specifically for that, my book is not the right one. But if you're looking for how do I honor you where we are and what we're going through in love, and how do I share that better? And how do I understand more of your fears and your hurts and your concerns? Yes, it's a beautiful book. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I already have a client in mind who I think could
Oh,
benefit from
awesome.
it so much. So the
Awesome.
link to that book will definitely be in the show notes. And please share with us where any listeners can find you, connect with you.
The easiest, it's the hub of Heather.
Yeah,
So www.drheatherbrowne.com, drheatherbrown.com. And on that, there's a whole page of freebies. I have a ton of freebies. I have courses. I have, of course, sessions. I have my book. I have my TEDx. Everything's on there. And I love hearing from listeners. So please, if you have a question, reach out. If I know the answer, I'll give it to you. If I don't, I will absolutely try to find someone who can. But I'm always honored to hear from people.
amazing. Thank you so much for this inspiring and just really beautiful conversation and just sharing your wisdom and passion. So thank you so much, Dr. Heather.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor and you are a delight.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.